Hi, I am Brandy Morales Espinal, and I am the client delivery leader here at Lumina Strategy. And what I do is I oversee all of the engagement teams that work with our clients on their B2B strategy, getting understanding of the value proposition that they provide to their customers. And we focus in differential value proposition. And I am happy to have here with me today Michelle Lee. She is VP of Marketing of Neelit. Michelle, thank you.
Hey, Brandy, it's great to see you again, and really excited to be part of the conversation today. So as you mentioned, my current title, I'm Vice President of Global Marketing for Neelit. And for those of you that don't know, Neelit is the #1 producer of sustainable nylon 6/6 yarns in the marketplace. So we work a lot with mills in a B2B business. And our focus is sustainability, and really excited to be part of this conversation today.
Thank you, Michelle. So wanted to talk to you today. Harvard Business Review wrote an article about the 6 ways to build a customer-centric culture. And obviously everything we do here at Lumina Strategy is putting the customer first. Right. And we help our clients understand their value proposition on a customer by customer basis. So, one of the things, that's really interested about the article is this idea about building a culture of customer centricity. And they talk about kind of 6 different ways that, they can help build a customer centric culture. So, in looking at those 6 things, do you think they go far enough as far as putting the customer at the center?
I thought, first and foremost, I thought it was a really insightful article. Anytime you read the Harvard Business Reviews, they're usually good information that's in there. And I think, I do think there's some really good insights when they talk about the different focus areas. I think customer centricity should be core to any business, right? I mean, if you don't have your customers, if you don't have happy customers, you don't have a business. And I think that's so critical for companies to consider, as they're building out their strategy. And I think, one of the things that I took away from the article too, and when they talked about the 6 different areas, if there's one that sticks out to me a lot right now, it's the empathy side. And how do you make sure that you're really being empathetic to your customers' needs and actually listening to them? Because I think, especially with what we've gone through over the past 2 years, you don't know what your customers are going through, and there's a lot of pressure on them. So I think, first and foremost, being empathetic, it should be a foundation for any successful customer experience strategy.
Yeah, empathy is important in being able to kind of connect basically everything that has happened, right? And so one of the things I think, in the process that we take at Luminous, starting with, the internal perspective, and then really having a discussion with the customer, right? And being, those conversations are so great. I mean, you got to participate in one. And, in those discussions, they're very warm, and you feel the empathy about the business and really having the customer at the center. And you learn so much. I mean, it's, I'm sure, it would be great. Like if you recall one of the discussions you had with one of the customers you worked with, how did that conversation, as you think of empathy here, how did that feel in the conversation about the learning about the customer's business?
Yeah, I think, I think sometimes it's good for customers just to know that you care and that you're actually listening to what they're going through and how they're feeling. And I think, you referenced how we worked together in the past. And I think one of my other takeaways too, and it was partially in the article, but also from my experience, is as a business, you think you understand your customers' needs. And that's what I loved about your approach at Luminous is, okay, here's a summary of what you're telling me as a business, but let's go actually talk to the customer and hear what they say. And sometimes it's not always lined up, and sometimes the customer isn't always transparent with you either. So having an intermediary or somebody that can help facilitate conversations to really get to the heart of what the concerns are, what unique value you bring, I think those are always beneficial ways to engage with your customer.
Yeah. And how do being engaging with your customer and, putting them centric, being empathetic, how does an organization, one of the things I thought in kind of their approach is, how does an organization know that they're being successful with their customers?
Yeah.
Right?
It's so true. It's so true. I think because I mean, I've worked for a few different companies, and I think, you have a vision statement and saying customers first and foremost, and you do a customer survey once a year. I mean, that's that doesn't really give you a good indication of what's really going on. So I think some of the key things is making sure that you are talking to your customer on a daily basis, right? And making sure that you are taking action against some of the things that they've told you. I think the other thing for me too, and I like simplicity. And in a few companies I've worked for, we've used the NPS, the Net Promoter Score, which is a great tool to be able to give you some sort of foundation, right? A quantitative analysis to say, okay, here's where we are today. Here's how we benchmark against our competitors even. And then you can track it. So every year, okay, yeah, we are moving forward. The one thing about the NPS is that it is quantitative and it's based on the one question. You have to get deeper than that. In order to get better, you have to make sure that you are having those ongoing conversations, or you are, doing your additional surveys to really understand, what are the key areas that you need to focus on.
Yeah, we've had clients use the NPS score, and the NPS score is a great indicator of the relationship. But to your point, it is one of the many factors, and it's typically what we do at Luminous. We focus everything on a particular customer, and so the NPS score is asking questions of a set of customers, right? And it's still, what do we think about all of our customers? Kind of that peanut butter smear. And so a lot of times clients appreciate the work that we do because it is very focused on one customer. It is quantitative, and it gets down to that next layer of insight and information that, coupled with the NPS, creates such a powerful metric for growth with clients. So I think, to your point, it is one of many ways to get customer centric. Yeah.
I agree. And like you said, the work that you do there too, and just really getting into the details and the weeds of, what is the unique value proposition, and, what are we providing our customers, and how do we help them make more money too by working with us, right? I love that. Like it's such a simple way to think about it.
So, obviously there's multiple tools people can use to gain customer centricity, right? And so, you as a leader or other leaders that are sitting in your seat to get to that point of customer centricity, what are some things that maybe didn't work?
Oh, that's a great question. I think I referenced one of them already, the one and done survey. When you send that out, and it just, you get great insight, but then nothing happens, right? Because it's not at the core of the company, right? People don't necessarily recognize, oh, this is important, that customers are first and foremost, and how do we make sure that it's an ongoing dialogue with them throughout the year? Because I have seen that where we do the once a year surveys and it never moves forward, and we're wondering why, right? So I think that's definitely one of the challenges, one of the things that you shouldn't do.
In the article, it talked about how one of the organizations facilitated the discussions with the customers, and they said, we invite them to one meeting out of the year to be with us and sit with us, right? And then we encourage our people to go stay at their kind of their spaces, at their like hotels and stuff. Yeah. And so this idea of, you know, the one and done, right? We're being customer centric because we asked them, we invited them to one meeting, where it's really this ongoing conversation, right? It's a one and more.
Exactly. And it doesn't need to be like it does feel like a one and done, right? As opposed to if it was part of your strategy, everything that you do should have that customer mindset first and foremost. Okay, you know, as part of our strategic goals and our priorities for next year, what's the impact to the customer by doing all of these, so that everybody in the organization has it on the forefront, right? And it's not, you know, infrequent, I guess.
Are there ways that, you know, in your role now at NELIT that you're trying to think of putting some things you're doing to put the customer at the center?
Yeah, I think so. You know, I think, as I mentioned, you know, some of the things that we've talked about are the NPS. You know, how do we at least get a baseline to be able to measure? And the article says that too. You know, it doesn't get done unless you actually measure it. And so working with tools like that, working with Luminous and understanding, okay, what is the unique value proposition that we do offer? So how do we stand out from our competitors so that we know how to communicate to our customers, right? Like these are all things that I think if your strategy is clear and how you want to work with your customers and what value you can bring to them, then it just becomes much easier, right? I think one of the other things too that I've seen work in the past that I think any company can and should consider, you know, right from the C-suite leaders, it's really putting yourselves in the seat of your employees for a day, right? To understand the different functional areas, like, you know, it's not only customer service, it's not only sales that's dealing with customers, but if you understood in procurement what's the impact on the customers, I think it gives you a perspective as a leader to be able to say, okay, you know, broadly, these are the areas that we could look at from across the organization.
Yeah, and I thought that was one of the things I think also in the article that I think aligned well, like in the work and how we engage, is bringing that cross-functional group together to understand how to serve the customer. Because as you know, in most organizations, they get the voice of the customer from either one or two people and say, yep, this is the voice of the customer. And sometimes it's the person that deals with them every day. And sometimes it's a person that says, I believe this is the voice of the customer and may not have any engagement. So that was one of the things I think when they called it out, saying, you know, working together and having everyone be tied to the success of the customer or client to create growth and be part of that strategy. Because at the end of the day, you know, being customer centric is a cultural change. Right? It's not a one and done.
Exactly. That's our statement for today.
That's our
one and done.
One and done.
Exactly. I will add too, I think, you know, one of my observations has been over the past couple of years too, like it used to be customer service was responsible for customer service. A lot of companies are moving away from customer service into customer experience, right? And thinking about the customer throughout their journey, not just when there's an issue and they call you and how do you deal with it, but right from the start of engagement with that customer, like how do you make it the best experience throughout? And so you see, you know, new roles in organizations now, like VP of customer experience that never existed before because it's so important to the success, right?
That I think I had read a stat, I think a year ago when they were talking about at the end of the year, like the #1 new roles, and it was like Chief Customer Experience Officer, right? It was like #1. Because obviously coming out of the pandemic, right? People were working remote and they realized, oh, wow, how do we engage the customer without going to them every day? Right?
So true.
Where do we engage with the customer? Wait, there are other people outside of sales that engage with the customer. So really looking at that journey across the customer, and how they engage with their organizations. That was very key out of the article.
Yeah.
So, thinking about this, developing a customer-centric organization, what can executives or the C-suite do to model a customer-first mindset in the organization?
Yeah, I think it's a great question and such a critical question too. And I think, first and foremost, I think it has to start with the strategy, right? It has to be part of the overall vision of the company to say customers are important to us and we need to become customer centric. I think, when people see it in a strategy and they start to hear it more and more in town halls and communication, then it starts to get ingrained, right, in everything that they do. I think anytime, a leader can reinforce that, it goes a long way. I think also building KPIs around that. I know the article talked about that as well. Like, how do you incentivize your employees, right? Like, and maybe it doesn't need to be monetary or a gift or anything. It can just be as rewarding as, hey, we reached one of our KPIs, like, great job. And, and they can see the progress that they're making from a customer standpoint. I think the other one that I've seen really work well as well is job shadowing, as a leader. And I went through this not as a leader, but, early on in my career, when I had an amazing leader and, they would come and sit with me for an hour or for a day and, like, what are you doing? How are you talking to the customer? What's happening? What are the concerns that you're hearing? I think anytime as a leader, you're showing that interest in the different functional areas in a company, it really reinforces how important it is, and it should be for them too, right? And it also gives the leader a broader understanding of all the touch points that the organization will have with the customer. I think that's critical.
The other piece of that is we're seeing this new roles in the C-suite of this chief, either customer experience or user experience type, chief customer experience or client experience officer role. And I mean, across all industries, of trying to make the customer the center of the organization. And to the point you made about job shadowing, it's, if someone's coming in and their goal is to work with the customer and make the organization a customer first, taking the time and learning how each of the functions engage with the customer, I think is important to incorporate it into the strategy, as you mentioned, and to shift the organization to become kind of a customer first and customer centric organization. There's a lot of learning that can be had for each function, even each other.
I completely agree. And I love what you said, like, organizations are restructuring around that today, right? It used to be the customer service team was the only one that talked to the customer service when there was an issue, but having customer experience, like we talked about, is becoming the norm in organizations too, because it should be that experience across their whole journey, not just when there's issues or good things happening.
Yeah. So, talking about, organizations have putting the customer first, even to the extent of hiring kind of a chief customer experience officer as part of the C-suite, where sometimes this role was probably maybe 2 or 3 levels down. It is now part of the executive team. And so, right now, we know that putting customer first is important. Also, coming out of COVID, and now what we have, the economy is now a little bit challenging. Potential of a possible recession in the news. Every day there's potential recession. And so, organizations are taking a hard look to say, hey, where are we going to invest right now? And so as they think about keeping the customer first, mitigating a recession, and where to invest, what do you think an organization, or what do you suggest an organization should do either now or kind of in the next quarter or so?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a very complicated and uncertain time, I guess, that you could say that we're heading into. But I think, just the entire conversation that we just had, now more than ever, I think it's crucial to have that customer strategy that the entire organization understands. And like we talked about, really understanding that customer journey so that you can understand at what point are you able to impact the customer. It doesn't just need to be how you're servicing them, it's throughout the journey, right? There might be things that are working well today. There might be things that you don't even know about in a certain area of those journeys. And if you knew that, you could understand maybe how you could pivot some of your strategy moving forward. I think when, time and money is so important, those are the questions that you should be asking. And how can I really make an impact on my customer throughout the journey? I think the other piece of it too, and we went through this exercise with Luminous, and I've been through it in different areas as well, is at each touch point, where do you add value as a company? What is your unique differentiation throughout each touch point of that customer journey? And when you're different than your competitors, it gives you that leg up as well to understand, how do you communicate them? What services do you provide them? What's the product that you're bringing them? It just gives you more confidence, right? As we're going into uncertain times.
So you made a valid point, Michelle, about the customer journey and, client, how your organization took the customer journey and understood where they're driving value or not, right? And what we see even in organizations is that the customer journey is becoming in more of importance. And this is across all industries. How do we engage with our customers? Where do we provide value to them or not? And the or not is typically the most insightful for the organization or clients that we work with. And we also bring in the next spin. Where do you provide differentiated value or not?
Yeah.
And so you think about what are the things you continue, what are the things you should stop doing, and your customers won't miss it. I mean, in all honesty, they won't miss it because they don't receive any value from it.
It's a great point, and it really resonates with me because I think, quite often we do look at, okay, what do we need to do? What are we doing now? And how do we make it better? We don't always have the conversations about what do we stop? And, it's not always easy for organizations because there are people that have vested interests in some of these areas that maybe aren't as meaningful for the customer. But I think, when you talk about heading into a recession and budgets and that, these are the things that you should be looking at. What can you stop, right?
So as you had to think, if in your seat, right, as another executive, and you were coaching or going to give feedback to a peer executive of, having gone through the work with Luminous, and all the other work you've done around customer centricity, what is one thing that you would say, hey, this is what you should do?
Just one thing?
Maybe three, top three.
I feel like I'm going to go back to what we've been talking about. I think it's really understanding that customer journey and what are the pain points through that customer journey and where do you provide that differentiated value for them, right? If you know that, then all of your strategy is built off of that, right? And that's how you grow your business and how you make your customers happy because you're servicing their needs. So I think the customer journey and knowing your part and the role that you can play in that is critical.
And to continue with our line today, don't make it one or done.
Exactly. I love it.
Be one and done.
It's so true.
Thank you, Michelle.
Absolutely.